Hi, welcome back to Tipping It with Sohem. In this tutorial, we are going to be looking into how to do animated page transitions with frame and motion. This video is actually the second part of a series of videos I'm making to teach you how to make an animated blog with frame and motion. So you can see on your screen, this is what we are going to be learning today. The page transitions from the home page to the individual pages for each post. In the previous tutorial, we built out the home page. You can see the animated carousel. We have a smooth scrolling carousel. In this video, we are going to be animating the page transitions. My name is Sohem and I'm excited to get started. So first things first, before we start, you would need the starter code for this. I mean, you could go ahead and implement your own POC, but to save some time, I implemented this, and you can take it from my repository, clone it, and then use it on your local machine. Go to this URL. This will be, by the way, this will be inside the description as well. So find it there, or you can type it manually, github.com/captainwolf/block-frame-and-motion. Captain Wolf is my username. Go there, clone the repository, and inside you're going to find a branch named 3-page transition start. This will be your starter code for this tutorial. So clone the repository, check out that branch, and let's get started. Let's turn off my dev server and see. Okay, it's running, and this is how it currently looks. This was where we left our progress in the last video. By the way, you don't have to watch the last video if you are just here to learn how to do page transitions. But this is the progress. We have a smooth scrolling carousel that you can scroll, and the carousel smoothly scrolls. It's built with frame and motion, by the way. And so yeah, that happens. The one change you find in the starter code as compared to where we left in the previous video is that there wasn't individual pages for each of these blogs. All of these were just they just popped out when you hovered over them, but there was no functionality behind it. Well, in this starter code, you have some functionality. You click here and you go to the individual blog pages. Now, I know the hero image looks very blurred, and that's because I'm using low resolution images, but that's not the point. Our point is to be doing something that transitions. Say I click on this post. Our point is to transition with animation, transition from this page to this page, and make it look seamless so that it looks good, right? I mean, say if two transitions were happening with completely two different effects, it wouldn't look good. In the preview that you saw in the very beginning of the video, what was happening was that this image was getting transitioned to up, and then this was coming below it, right? These texts and these pictures were then coming below it. So it looked very seamless. So how do we achieve such an effect? Well, let's develop an intuition for it. If you are new to my channel, know that I work on the intuition behind developing something first and then start with the coding later. That helps you in visualizing what exactly needs to be done in case you need to go off the track and try something on your own. So yeah, I use GIMP for demonstrating something or drawing something up. It helps. So how do we do a page transition between two pages so that it looks seamless? In the preview, you saw that unless you were looking at the URL, you wouldn't be able to tell when one page ended and the other page began when it was transitioning. There was no clear boundary between them. So how do you visually achieve that? One of the things you can do is to be a bit clever. And okay, say there are, okay, I'm going to switch to a different color. Say, what do I switch to? Okay, let's try purple. Okay, so say here is web page 1, here is web page 2, and I need to transition with an animation between these two, so it doesn't look as if this just went up in the air, just vanished, and then this one came suddenly. I mean, it shouldn't jump cut to the next page. There should be a transition. So how do we achieve that? Well, what if, say, we have our carousels here, right, in the home page. We have a grid of carousels right here. The effect we want is that upon clicking of these, this should bring me to this page where we have a hero image here, and some text here. Ignore the text for now. So how do we achieve a seamless transition between two dissimilar looking pages? I mean, look at the layout on the left. It doesn't match with anything that's on the right hand side, right? It doesn't. On the left, you see a grid. On the right hand side, you see a post title, a hero image, whatever. So they don't match. So how do you exactly transition between them? Well, the intuition behind this is that people wouldn't be able to tell when one transition ended and the other one began if the first transition ended exactly where the next transition started. What do I mean by that? Well, think of it in this way. Say, here is an image here, right? Say I click here. Then let's say upon clicking, what I do is that upon clicking, say it animates to here. Say it jumps out of its place and then goes upward, expands, and then fills the space here. It occupies the same width and height that this hero image is supposed to occupy. Now, when we have done that, step number 2, say we make this grid disappear now. So what are we left with? We are left with something that would look, let me use a different color for this. Let's say blue. So we are going to be left with something that would look like this. Remember, I said the image is supposed to go up. So we have the image here, and then the grid is supposed to disappear. So we are left with something like this. Now, see that we are in the between of transitioning between this, and that is because now visually we are in a position that we can transition further to this page and it wouldn't look as if it was jump cut, because these content that appears beneath this hero image is the same as if it would have appeared here, meaning that now after this transition gets over in page 1, by the way, this is still page 1, right? We haven't left page 1, and this is page 1 as well. We animated from here to here, and then from here now we can switch to, navigate to the second page, and it wouldn't look as if it was jump cut because the layout of the second page matches somewhat with that of the first page, creating a continuity. So so to viewers, it would look as if this image went up and then these texts came below it with an animation. People wouldn't be able to tell where this cut happened because visually there was no cut, right? It is one continuous motion. And that's one of the many ways you can do page transitions visually that looks cool. So that is enough of theory. Now let's get started. I think it's a closed game. Let's keep it open. I might need to show you some things. All right, so we have the page here. Let me open the console. Okay, and this was our code from the last video. I recommend watching the last video, at least the source code of, or at least the end of the last video, to know exactly where we left off. And if you want to understand what we did above all of these, then you might need to watch the last video. Else, let's just continue from here. So what the code we have two routes declared with React Router DOM. One is the home page. In this tutorial, in this starter code, you're gonna see this component here, this post page that we also have at url/post/id. We have the home here, we have the post carousel here, and then we have the individual post page here, and that is all that's happening. And how are we managing to get the post? Well, we have the ID that we get out of the parameters passed to the URL. We destructure that and then use that to filter through posts, which is an array, and find the one that we need. So we are filtering through data, which is an array of posts, and we are finding the post that we want by matching the IDs, and we are memoizing that and storing it in post. So this post will contain all the information we need to render out our page. It contains the image, the title, description, author, date, time, and so on. That is our arrangement for this. Now let's start. So we're going to be working with frame of motion, right? Let me show you something. Let me type in here, animate presence frame of motion. You're going to see what this is. So in frame of motion, whenever a React component gets unmounted Framer motion has to know when it gets unmounted to be able to show you exit animations. This was very vague of me to say. I should demonstrate it with a diagram. Do I erase this one? Or do I create a new one? Let me create a new one. Okay. So we have the previous one, we have the new one. Okay. So how does animation work exactly in Framer motion? Just like components that have their own life cycle methods, animations in Framer motion also have their own life cycle methods. What I mean by that is that imagine I was creating this in Framer motion. Say here is a circle, a blue colored circle. Maybe it's created with a div with border radius set with 250%. I have this circle here, and say after animation what I want is that circle to become this. Say it was filled with red color. Just assume it's filled with red. I'm not going to fill up all of that. So if we are animating from the left hand side to the right hand side, visually, what are the changes that needs to be done? Well, right off the bat, we see that we need to increase the scale and change the background color. So initially we have this. Upon animating, after the animation gets over, we have this. And say that after we reach the red color, we just want it to disappear. So we are finishing off with an opacity of 0. So here are two properties, and here are two properties, and at the end is one property, the opacity, right? So how Framer motion works is that there are 3 life cycle stages that Framer motion elements go through while animating. We have what is called the initial. Should I type it here with paintbrush or what? Okay. There is something called the initial. The initial defines the stage where the animation hasn't yet started, but it is where it is supposed to be at the very beginning. So at the very beginning, we have a small circle colored blue. This is initial. Then we have something called animate. What animate is the life cycle method. It's the stage in the life cycle where the animation has just completed. So at the end of the animate life cycle stage, we would get a scaled up circle with a red colored background color. And then at the end, we have something called, now what color do I use for this? Say green. I mean, it's not visible because it's supposed to be with opacity 0. I'm smart. Yeah, but it looks weird. I think I should just color this thing. It's opacity 0. There is no border. I'm just drawing it so that it doesn't look invisible. And the last life cycle stage we have is exit. Exit defines when the element has animated out and is out of the DOM. This is important to understand. Exit animations fire only when that element, that specific DOM element, that motion element is taken out of the DOM tree. So if you just use React to say conditionally render a component or any element, if you used just React with any native element, it would just go out of the view if it's taken out of DOM, right? It would just disappear. But with Framer motion, what you can do is to run an exit animation before it gets unmounted. That is where Framer motion comes in, when the element is supposed to get exited. The problem is that Framer motion needs to know when an element is taken out of the DOM, because when React takes an element out of the DOM, it doesn't inform Framer motion, right? So Framer motion has to intervene before that happens. And the way to do that with Framer motion is through a component called animate presence. What animate presence allows you to do is that any direct motion elements or motion components that are the direct children of animate presence will know exactly when those components or elements get unmounted, and it can accordingly fire their exit animations before the unmounting happens. Meaning you can now have exit animations as well, in addition to initial and animate stages. So you would get initial and animate on your own with Framer motion. If you want to use exit animations, you need animate presence as well. We need exit animations here because, like I said, we are going to be animating from here to here, meaning we are exiting from here and entering from here with the initial that looks like this. So the initial for the first page would look something like this. Ignore the hero image above. I think I should erase it. because this creates yeah, this doesn't look quite accurate. What the hell, I need a bigger brush. What, not that big. Still too big. Yeah, so let's erase this. So the initial for the first page would look like this. Animate for the first page would look like this. Then initial for the second page would look something like this, and animate for the second page would look something like this. So like I said, where the first page animates to the end, the other page animates from it, creating a smooth, seamless animation, and that is what we are going to be doing right now. So let's get started. You can read the documentation if you want. It's at framer.com/docs. You can also Google for it. Now let's get started. So animate presence needs to be at the very top of whatever of the DOM tree that we have, and only direct children of it can be exited out. If we go to app here, we have our routes. Now what are routes essentially? Well, if you have used switch statements before in any programming language, you know that what switch statement does is that it allows you to jump to any specific part of the code by comparing some condition. Routes are similar, isn't it? I mean, what it does is that it checks the condition, which is the path being equal to what we set it to be, and if the condition is satisfied, the component is rendered. It's the same as if my path was slash, if I replace the entire thing with this, it is as if the entire routes component was replaced with a home page. It would behave as it is. Similarly, we would have the post page as if it replaced the entire part of the code here, the part of the component here, if the path was this. So which means that we have the home page and the post page right over here. We assume these to be this. So why can't we do something like animate presence? We can do something like this, isn't it? And the answer is yes, we can. As long as home page and post page have a parent element that is motion element. Right now, they say the component for home is a main. We need to transform this into a motion component. I'll show you how, but let's come to this page. There's one additional thing we have to do. See, animate presence takes a prop called the exit before enter. What this allows you to do is that unless you pass in this prop and set its value to true, you will see the exit animation of one page and the entry animation of the other page happen at the same time. We don't want that. We want the first page to go out, and only then should the second page come in. So you need to set exit before enter. Our work here is done. Let's go to home. Now we see here's a motion. It's main, right? We need to transform it into motion. So what frame motion does is that for every native React element you have, it exports something called motion elements. So if you want to transform this main to a motion element, what you do is simply type motion.main. Motion is a collection of several elements that have been augmented with additional props and functionalities to convert them to motion elements. Motion elements are the exact same as their native element counterparts, with the difference is that it has some extra functionality. And this extra functionality comes in the form of stuff that you can use with frame motion. So remember those lifecycle wrong tab. Remember those lifecycle methods I was talking about earlier, initial, animate, and exit? Well, what you can do is mention. Okay, I think I should talk about variants first before I know it's getting too complicated for now, but yeah, that's just how frame motion works. So if an element is supposed to have an initial animation, an animate animation, and an exit animation, well, one of the things you can do is to combine this information in an object. Say, okay, think about this. Here is an object. Ignore the syntax and everything for now. Say initial. If I was to code this one into, I mean, with JavaScript here, if I was to turn that into code, what I would do is initial, say the scale was 1 and its border radius is 50% and so on, and I would have done that. Then what I would have done is to say animate where I would have done something like, well, now its background color is, I mean, you get that. Now it's red, and earlier, say it was blue, uh, and so on. So I would have done something like this. I mean, to combine the animation information together in one place. This object right here is what frame of motion calls variance, and you need variance to cause any sort of animation. So taking this out, how you pass variance? You type here variance and then pass in your object. We don't need to pass any variance here because the entire container, we're not doing anything to the entire container. If you look at the diagram here, we're not animating between containers, is it? We are animating between what is inside of the first page's container, transitioning it to this, and then we are animating the inside elements of the second container, meaning we're not doing anything to the parent container. So these don't need variance. But what we do need is to mention, okay, let me have a look here. What if, okay, let's try something. Let's not make it motion. You're gonna see why let's not make it motion. Let's deviate a bit. So you have the H1 here. It doesn't need animation. You have the post carousel here. In the earlier video, we animated this. So this is motion. But now what we want is to animate the image of the post carousel upwards, right? And let's start with them. And here is another concept that you need. I know there's way too many concepts with frame of motion, just bear with me. This one's going to be very easy to understand. Say you have an image here, well, that's way too big. Say you have an image which is here, and say it's on your page, and say it animates to somewhere else, say here. Now you can take care of this animation on your own and do all of that complicated mathematics to figure out what will be the coordinates of the component or the element after the animation is done. You can do that on your own, or you could let frame of motion handle it for you. The way you would do this is very simple. There's a prop called the layout ID. If the layout IDs of these two components match, what happens is that frame of motion animates this one to this one and handles all of the calculation on its own. So say initially, say this component doesn't exist on the right hand side, and you have this component here with a layout ID of a string called 1. It's a string. These are just double quotes to show it's a string. So this is your DOM tree. So you have only one image that is that has a layout ID of 1, and it's a motion element. It's a motion.img. Now, if somehow we were to insert another element before this one inside the DOM tree that also had a layout ID of 1 as taken as a string, then what frame of motion would do is that upon a re-render, when this component would be inserted into the DOM, upon re-render, it would visually animate between this. It would take it to here, performing all necessary transitions and transformations and all other changes that it needs to do. You don't have to do anything. We are going to be doing that. So think about this. We have the image here, right? This image represents our the carousel's image, the post image, every individual block, those images. So what if we transform this into a motion.img? Okay. Now we need a layout ID for these individual images so they can be taken up. Yeah. What do we get the layout ID? It has to be something that is unique to every single image. So we can animate them separately upon clicking, else all of them will just animate above. That's not what we want. So let's use the ID as the layout ID, but it has to be a string, remember? So string. And why does it have to be a string? Why not number? And that's what frame of motion requires. So we're going to give it what it needs. We're going to give it a string. Okay, we have the actual carousel here. Cool. I did say that we need to insert another image, another motion element right above it, right? I mean, we have to do something in the DOM tree so that the new element is situated above the old one with the same layout ID, and only then FrameMotion would animate it. How do we do that? Well, the image appears here in the code. Somewhere above might be this here at this location. So what if we rendered out a motion.img with the same layout ID as this one? Well, what would happen is that you would see a visual animation between this and the motion element that would be here. So let's do that now. Okay. We need a way for us to conditionally render this, right? Okay. Let's create another custom hook for this. We say use post select. Let's call it, yeah, export const use post select. It's custom hook and it returns stuff. And then let's call it for post select. Let's destructure some stuff. I'll use post select. All right, now let's start working on this. So we need a way, number one, we need a way for us to track which element was clicked, right? How do we do that? Well, what if we don't destructure this here, set it to post, because data is an array of posts. So instead of destructuring, this has broken quite a lot of things. So let's fix that before moving on. These would be this. And let's do away with the link. The link is supposed to just it's from React router down. What it does is that it renders an anchor element that navigates to another page component on the client hand side. So let's get rid of this. We're gonna not need this because we need to control the navigation on our own, because if people click on this, it would go straight to the next image without firing that animating that animation that we are working on of animating the image up. It won't fire that because before that happens, it would change the page. So we need to take control of the navigation ourselves. We need to fire the navigation after the exit animations are done. So we can't be going with this. Let's take that out. We don't need this. We don't need this. We're gonna have to figure out animation, the actual page navigation on our own. Set a key, and this would be post.ig. And upon selecting the post, let's now create. I think posts was here. This function that returns a post. Let's export the type of the post. And now let's create a state for storing the selected post. So selected post, set selected post is a state that will either contain a post or be null initially. So we have the type set to null as well. And we return selected post as well as set selected post. And yeah, let's do that. And so we have selected post, set selected post. Let's go to set selected post. Upon clicking, let's say we want to set the selected post as the current post. So every element on the carousel will set itself its own information as the selected post, which would then come here in the selected post. Now let's conditionally render this out. Let's name it top hero image for page transition. So we know exactly what this is later when we come back to our code. It's a motion element. It would have a source. It would need an alt, and it would need a class for styling. What do we call it? Post hero image. Let's call it selected post hero image. Okay, for the source, now we have the selected post dot source, but before that we should be only rendering this out, like I said, when a post is selected. If it's not and we still render it out, what it would do is that upon getting a valid layout ID, this would never render in the first place. You would only see this. We don't want this. We want it to appear only when we have selected this. So the condition for this would be, if selected post does exist, only then render this out. So we're going to be doing that. And like I said, the layout ID has to match. The layout ID was the post ID. So we are going to be doing something here. Same layout ID is the same as the post's ID, the selected post dot ID converted to a string. So now they have the same layout ID, and you will see the transition. But before that, we have the source as well. So let's do this stuff. And the alt set to selected post dot say, let's say the title of the stuff. Although it would be only visually there for a few seconds, let's still implement this. Okay, we have this. Now let's take the class. Now we have to style it in such a way that it occupies the same dimensions and positions as this image, right? Because remember, we have to make it look seamless, like a smooth transition. For that, we have to match it to what this hero image is actually supposed to look like. So where is the style for this? Inside the styles.css. Okay, this is the styles.css for the post, for the home page, and this is the style page for the post page. Inside the post page, if we take a look at the hero image, the height is a 33 viewport height, which means 33% of the viewport's height. Object fit cover, width is a full page, and visually it is on the top, and it bleeds edge to edge. Okay, let's keep that in mind. So we have to achieve something visually similar. Let's do this here with the class name. So we have to achieve something similar. How do we do that? Well, what if we fixed its position, took it all the way up, set its width to 100%, set its height to 33 VH, because remember, we have to match the height and width, and the position as well. We have it, and it's supposed to have an object fit up cover, and its display is supposed to be block. And now that we have it up there, let's so we have it there, and okay, so would this work? Let's test it out. We have this image here, and this should be appearing, but there is one problem. Like I said, if you have to animate from here to here, now that image appears here, it makes no sense to show the same post here as well. I mean, what I want is that the post to be taken out of the carousel and taken above. We have it above, but the same post does also appear here, is it not? I mean, frame motion would remove this image from here, but the entire post would still stay, right? I mean, the text would still stay. We don't want it. It would look visually very bad. So let's remove that. Let's filter it out. And let's say the post, and let's say we are filtering out only if the post.id doesn't match the one which is here. So only if the ID of the selected post doesn't match with the current post that it is iterating over, only then allow the component to be rendered, else not. So this would be removed, animated. This entire component wouldn't appear for the specific post that we selected, and I think this should work. Let's try. Save all. Let's refresh. I think V does a refresh. Okay, let's select the second one. Cool. Let's refresh and try again and see what happens. These errors are from my browser extensions. These are not from my page. So just ignore these, okay? So I click here and you see what happens. Take note. This animates to here, but it gets removed out of the DOM, right? I mean, it transitions up, which is correct, but then this one doesn't animate and come to occupy its place. It just jumps right in. Observe what happens to this one. It just jumps from its position here to its position here. It just jumps. Now, we could go ahead with this, but visually it doesn't look very appealing. We would want it to animate to its new position. Now, again, we could go ahead and do all of that animation on our own and give ourselves a migraine that we would suffer for the next 24 hours. Or we could be smart about this and let frame of motion handle it for us. Yes, frame of motion would handle that. And you just need to pass one prop for this to happen. Just one. Frame of motion is so powerful. Watch. So now, we're supposed to be animating these figure elements. These figure elements are these individual boxes here. We need to be animating their transitions so that they animate to their new position when occupying new positions when we filter these out, right? Step number 1. Convert these to motion elements. You should be converting everything to a motion element before starting to integrate frame of motion with that very element, right? Because it cannot work on standard native elements. You have to convert them to motion. Now, let's say I'm passing this layout prop. What this layout prop is that it tells frame of motion that whenever you encounter a render where the position or transformation, color, whatever of this element, it changes. Whenever you encounter a change, you must not just take it to its new position and new color, transformation, new whatever it is. Don't just take it to there, rather animate it to there. You're telling frame of motion, frame of motion tells React to do that, and the way is that you pass the layout prop. So now React knows not to take it out and place it in the new position, but animate to its new position. We set the layout here. Also, does anything else need layout changes? Nah, I don't think so. Save it. Let's find it out. Do a refresh. Isn't that smooth? Watch what happens. Now let's click on the last one. See, now it animates, and then the element that we click goes above, and simultaneously all the pictures on the right shifts to the left with an animation. This looks much better, in my opinion. Much better, much visually better. Okay. So we animated the carousel. Fine, great. And let's take care of the navigation. So we are supposed to be clicking, and then the page transition is supposed to happen, right? But these pictures would also have to disappear, is it not? Because that was what I previewed you, that these would disappear. This hero image would appear up, and then we would switch to a new page. So let's take care of making these disappear in a sequence. How do we do that? We have individual elements here. We have the parent motion element here. Like I said, what if we pass variance to this one to mark its exit animation, and variance to here to coordinate their animation? So if we just pass a variant to here, that would say an exit animation of turning the opacity to 0. All of their opacities would be turning to 0 at the same time. Let me show you what it means. This is something that you gotta do to figure it out. Just talking about it wouldn't really help you with frame of motion. There are so many things to handle. All right, now let's say I need the variance from. Okay, let's define the variance here. So gotta destructure it. Let's say I name something called the post variance of type variance taken out of frame of motion. I'm using TypeScript, and say I'm using memoization so that doesn't initialize over and over again. Here is an object, a JSON, and it depends on nothing, so it is memoized forever. We have these post variants. Let's return them here. Let's first set it here before working on our post variants. Post variants here. Every post, where the hell is it? Right here. No, not here. This variance is the post variance. This. Okay. Now that's set. And remember how I said that the names, the key names inside the variance has to match with whatever the life cycle methods, right? I mean, say that you make an object like this. You say leave, which is the key, and you want it to get fired whenever exit animations take place. Say this is what we want to do. Upon exiting, you want the opacity to be 0. But leave isn't the name of the lifecycle method, right? I mean, the lifecycle method for exiting was exit for frame emotion. So how do we tell this component or this element right here that you are supposed to be using the leave object inside the post variance for your exit? The way you would do is to say exit, which is a prop, and this prop is used to pass the name of the sub object inside the variance that contains the information of the animation when you are exiting it. In this case, it would be leave. And then frame emotion would know that, okay, when I'm taking this out, I'm supposed to fire the leave object inside post variance. So it would fire this one, right? I'm not going to mix up names, so I'm going to call it exit. It just keep things, clear and much less confusion less. So we have the exit right there. Sorry. I'm just going to have to drink some water. Hold on. Back again. Stay hydrated, folks. So let's continue. So we set the exit here, and this exit would point to this one. We have our opacity 0. Okay. And do we want just an opacity 0 or something? Okay, let's keep it simple. Let's just keep it opacity 0. Okay, so the opacity is supposed to be 0, and you can mention a transition here as well, meaning you can control how the opacity animates to a 0, because this is the final state. And with transition, you mention how that final state is supposed to be reached. So say I want the duration of this to be 0.2. So the element is supposed to vanish, have opacity 0 in 0.2 seconds, meaning it would animate from opacity 1, which is the default, to an opacity 0, which is the exit, with under 0.2 seconds. It would take a total of only 0.2 seconds. So we have it here, we have the exit, but we won't be able to see the exit animations, remember, until we are actually exiting from the page, because we set the animate presence to the parent component level, which means we have to somehow make the home page disappear and the post page appear. And the only way to do that is that if we navigate from one page to the other, right? So let's do that. And I think, yeah, remember how I said we don't have to set it to motion? We do have to set it to motion. You will see why. There is a little more concept about frame motion. And that is, remember how I said that animate presence can only animate the exit animation of its of its direct child components only? Now you might be asking, well, now if this is a motion element and animate presence only controls the the direct children of this. Post carousel is a direct children, but this is not a direct child of home, right? It's not a direct child. So how does that happen? How would these even get fired? And that's because there is another concept which states that if whatever life cycle names you pass to the parent element, okay, let me show you. Let's quickly do it. Initial, set to an initial. Animate, set to an animate. Exit, set to exit. Whatever names of the sub-object of the variance that you pass here for every single life cycle stage, this will be propagated to its children. Meaning that if you set this here, say this, and now you remove this one, then whenever this would have its own exit animation, this would also have its own exit animation. And that is exactly what we want. We want the exit, because animate presence would only be exiting this one. It won't be exiting anything inside it unless we take control of it by mentioning these at the very top and then removing the declaration from here and allowing this to flow from here. There is another thing. So say it flows to post carousel. This is on the parent. Okay, it flows to post carousel. Fine, which means it flows to this. But this is not a motion div, and the propagation would stop. So let's turn this into a motion element as well. Okay, now it propagates. It comes to here. It comes to here because it's already motion, and then it comes to here because it is already motion as well. So it flows from the parent to the child, and so it comes here. Now remember, if you define your own initial, animate or exit on any of the child inside the parent container, then it wouldn't receive or stay in the same flow as the original parent's animation. Meaning that if I define my exit here, it wouldn't be coordinated with what is here. It wouldn't. So that's something you should remember. Anyways, so I have my variance. By the way, you can override variance. I mean, you cannot override the lifecycle method name. So you cannot say, set something here and expect it to work with the parent. It wouldn't. But you can override variance, right? So because every child can have its own variance, it doesn't make sense that every child should share the same variance. So both have their own variance. And when exit is fired on the home page, exit would be fired on here as well. Okay, correct. And exit would be fired here first. So every element would go and have opacity 0 at this point. That is what we set it to be. Upon changing the page, which is upon the selected post, which was originally null, not being null. If it becomes non-null, we can assume that indeed someone clicked, and when someone clicks, we can then take them to our next page. So let's use a use effect here that runs every time selected post change, and if it is non-null, meaning someone selected a post, then we are free to navigate to a new page, right? So let's import this. Yeah, it doesn't exist here. Okay, for navigating to post page, let's call it post variance for disappear on exit, and this is selected post. Yeah, such a descriptive comment. This is same name as the element. Yeah. Anyways, it's called the navigate object from use navigate. Use navigate is for, we have routed down version 6 only. Version 5, I think it had a use router that you could use for the same purpose. Let's navigate to our URL was /post/ the ID of the selected post. In this case, it would be selected the ID. So it would navigate, which would cause an exit of this component, which would cause the animation to be fired for here for a duration of 0.2. It would be too fast. Let's set it to 1 so that we can actually see it happening. And then this one would be set in its place. But if one motion element disappears and the other appears, the appearing element should also be a motion element. So if this home, which is a motion main, disappears and post is supposed to come in its place, it should be a motion element as well. Like I said, we have to maintain the continuity. And if we're maintaining the continuity, okay, we need to import motion. Hold on. Motion. And to maintain the continuity, the names have to be the same. I like to keep the same names everywhere, which doesn't cause ambiguity later down the line. I have this, and then it would animate to this. This page has the animation currently, but we are going to be animating every single thing here later. Let's figure out the exit animation here. So let's save it. Now let's view it. Refresh, and okay, that didn't fire, did it? No, it doesn't fire. Let's take a look and see why. So we have the exit, which is supposed to be firing here. So somehow the exit doesn't flow here. Let's check why. I just said animate, initial and exit, they cannot be defined anywhere in the DOM tree if we are to coordinate the animation with the parent. So they're not defined here. Okay. So maybe it gets stopped at its parent. Its parent is this. Do we have a life cycle method here? Let's look. We do have a life cycle method. From the last tutorial, we were using the animate. Remember, we were. So that is why it doesn't flow. So we can have to take control of it ourselves again. So what if I manually set it to exit? Okay. Now we have untethered it from its parent, but the parent doesn't have an animation in the first place. So maybe we can do that. So we set it to exit, and the variance, we have it, and this should work. Let's try. Refresh. Still doesn't work. That's embarrassing. Doesn't work. So it still stops somewhere. And obviously it stops because the moment you are defining the animate, exit is no longer exit because we just redefined animate. So exit is null here. We have to make sure that exit is exit here. Okay, let's try setting the exit to an exit. And let's try removing this. What happens? Let's see. Okay. Still doesn't happen. Let me take a break and figure it out. And I think I know what's the problem. I think I know. So animate presence, like I said, can animate between components, but there is a condition with animate presence. That condition is that every component under animate presence should have its own key. If there are multiple components, you need every component to have its own unique key. So animate presence can figure out which one went up, which one went away from the DOM, deleted from the DOM, and which one came in. But if you have just one component in animate presence, you don't have to give that key. But here we do, because we have multiple of this. So how do we figure out a key? Well, what if we do something like, what if we take the key as the path name of the routes? Path names are unique, and keys must be unique. So why not use the path names as the key? Let's do that. Let's say the location is a use location, again taken from the VI routed DOM. Let's set it the location object to be this, so it's consistent. And the key, now we need an individual key for the components. Let's say the location, say path name. Let's do that. Let's save. Would we now have animations? And we do. Awesome, we got it figured out. Splendid. It disappears. Remember, we set the transition to 1 second. If you remember here, we set the duration to 1, so it would be animating, disappearing for 1 second before it changes to a new page. Okay. But let's do something better with this. Let's not just make them disappear. Let's make them disappear in a sequence that would make it look like a wave. If you saw my preview, just go rewind and you will see that it doesn't just disappear all at the same time. It disappears in a straight line starting from the left to right. So how do we achieve that? Okay. What if we set a variant here that can control the exit animations here? FrameMotion also allows parents to control their children directly. So let's also do that. Post variants, exit on disappear. We have the post variants. Now set the carousel variants. It's also a variant. Obviously, memoized to make it efficient. To nothing, and also the exit, keeping the name same. And the carousel wouldn't undergo any animation, but we will need to take control of its transition. There is a property called staggered children. We'll set it to 0.1. What staggered children is that it tells FrameMotion to not start the exit animation of all of its children at the same time, which is currently what's happening now. If you see, the exit animation of all of these underlying elements gets fired at the same time, meaning they disappear together. See, all of them together. We don't want that. We want them to sequentially go. And we can use this staggered children property to say, well, don't just fire everything at once. make sure there is a delay of 0.1 second for each component before you fire them. So this one would be fired, then 0.1 second delay, then this one would be fired, then a 0.1 second delay, then this one would be fired, and so on, creating a wave effect. So instead of it just animating like this, disappearing out, it would animate as if it goes from left to the right. You're gonna see what I mean. So let's. Animating is hard, by the way, if you're wondering. There's so much things to do to achieve something so simple. That's because it is simple because there's something so much complicated happening with it underneath, right? We are just hiding away the complicated parts, making it visually smooth. Let's destructure it. Now with the carousel variance, we'll set the carousel variance to here. That would now control this one, staggering these animations. We have the exit. Let's save and do this. Save. And let's say the first one. And if you saw it, okay, I'm gonna set this to 1 so that you can see what's happened. So you can see the staggering effect. See what happens. See? Now it gets staggered, and every element from here would be getting staggered. We have a lot of these happening, so every single one of them would get staggered. Of course, we wouldn't want this to be so slow, so we need to make this staggering. Let's say we only have a 0.1 second stagger, and this, let's say, takes 0.2. Now we're just playing with the values to make it look good. Let's see. Too fast, isn't it? Let's make this 0.2. Let's see what happens. Maybe not. Let's increase the duration of this one. Let's make it 4, or let's make it 3, say, for example. What happens? Or better yet, let's not just set a duration, let's also set an easing for that so it doesn't go linearly, so that it looks good. What easings are, it doesn't have an ease of its own. Frame motion did have a typing for the ease, does it not? Ease in out. Okay. What easings are they are just functions that, just names of functions that tell whatever the animating engine we are using on how to go with the animation. What I mean by that is that, let's look at GIMP again. So there are many ways in which you can transition from the initial state to the final visual state of an animation. So you can okay, let's imagine there's a graph. And say, so this is time axis, this is progress. What is progress? Well, progress, let's say it's defined as the percentage of animation that has completed. We're starting from 0, and we need to say we set our animation to take only 1 second. So it has to finish within this, meaning our progress, if it's 100 meaning 100%, it has to reach, this has to be reached here. This point, it just has to reach here, because 1 second is the time we're giving it to achieve 100% of the animation. Now we can either go from here to here linearly, or we can go with a curve, or maybe at this curve, or maybe an ease in and out. We can take multiple routes to achieve the same ending state. What ease in animation is that it starts slow first and speeds up later, which means if you saw its graph, you will see ease in is this one. So very slight progress initially, but very rapid progress later. Ease out would be the exact opposite, meaning it would ease on its way out, meaning it would be very fast initially, meaning see much more of the progress in a very little time, but it would slow down later. And ease in out is something in between, which means it eases both on its way in the beginning as well as in the end. So it's slow in the beginning, slow at the end, and fast in the middle, which means somehow like this. You don't have to memorize the graph this is what I just used to make you understand. What I'm doing here is that I just don't want it to disappear linearly. If it disappeared, if the animation happened linearly, we call this linear easing. So default is linear. We don't want linear. It looks weird. So I'm just going to go with easy in and out. It's just me playing around at this point. Let's try. I think way too fast. What if we make it 0.3? What happens then? I just want a bit of a smooth flow, This looks good. Perfect. So, watch what happens. Our image goes up, rest of them disappear, and then the next page comes up. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So now that finishes up our animation for the post carousel page. We have it animating. So we can close this, we can close the home page, we can even close the app component. Now let's animate here, because this just appears out of thin air. It just blows up on your screen, just comes there. We don't want that. We want them to animate. If you saw the preview, we're going to be doing something like that. Very simple. It would just animate from the bottom to the top, slightly above. So it looks very simple. Okay. So we're going to need variants for this one as well. So let's not create a custom hook for that. Let's just do it here. Let's say, what do we call it? What do we comment it? For post variants. Let's just call it variants of type variants. I am recording, right? Yeah. The first time when I was recording this, I forgot to hit the record button and I recorded the entire 2 hour of the first video. Then I cried. No, I didn't actually cry. But it was frustrating. I never hit the record button. Okay, we're using the use memo. We need a variant, and now we need to animate the animate life cycle of the elements, right? Because now we're not exiting. In the blog page, we are animating. Why did I open Discord? Misclick. Okay, so now we are animating inside the page, meaning we have to use the animate life cycle now. Okay. Good. Now we have variants, but we need the animation. So now let's go to something like a Y of a 50 to an opacity of 1. But let's also start. Oh no, we do need an initial here because we do have to mention. Let's not make a typo. We do have to mention what we want to animate from. This is not what animate is. This I'm gonna explain what I'm doing in a second. It starts from 0 to a 0. Okay, now look what it is, the animation we are trying to approach. So initially it should start with its Y, meaning a translate Y. There are many shorthands that Frame Motion provides you. One of them is this Y here, which stands for translate Y. If you know CSS, you would know that this translates to how many pixels you would want the element to be positioned. So we want it to be set to 50 pixels on the positive Y direction, which means below, right? Because the coordinate system in a browser is such that the origin is on the top left of your screen, meaning there is no negative value. Down is positive Y, right hand side is positive X. So we want to start on a positive Y of 50, meaning every element on the screen, everything that you see here would start from just 50 pixels below where it is supposed to be, with an opacity of 0, and it ends where it is supposed to be on the Y, and it then appears. So it animates from it has a fade in animation. It travels from bottom to up with a fade in effect. We also have to give it a transition, else the animation wouldn't look good. And let's say the duration, say 0.75 seconds with an ease of say, what do we call, what do we give in the ease? Well, I wanted to have, I mean, let's say, okay, let's call it the ease out effect. Or rather, okay, let's go with the ease in out first. Now, what are we animating exactly? We have the initial animate and exit here. It will flow to its children. That is what we want. Oh, and since, okay, we need a custom variant here. You're gonna see why. And because remember that to animate these in sequence, one after the other, we have to pass staggered children. Remember that property, we have to pass it to its parent. And this only passes to its parent when we are animating. So let's set this to animate, transition to a staggered children of say 0.1. Okay. So now every motion element under this would be staggered by a 0.1 second compared to its preceding motion element. So we want it to flow through article. So motion article is a motion. We don't want the image to be animated because it is exactly where it's supposed to be, right? But heading, as well as the author section and the date section, as well as the post, should be animating. Oh, and we also have to end it correctly. Motion. We did miss one. Yeah. And this fade in animation now has to be inside every single one of them. So what are we animating? We are animating this one. Okay, let's do a slight rearranging. Okay, so it looks cool. We need variance here, we need variance here, and we need variance here. No, let's animate every single paragraph instead of animating the whole section. Okay, so let's transform this to a motion dot e, and okay, so we need variance here, we need variance here, and we need variance here. Okay, let's set it to variance, set to variance. Okay, every single one of them is a motion. Okay, and I think we're good to go, is it? Let's try. Let's save. The animation was way too slow, isn't it? I think 0.5 or maybe 2.5 or maybe 2.5. Let's try with 2.5. Let's try. Save it. Let's say we are opening this one. Too fast. Set it to 0.5. Let's go back and let's say this. This looks cool enough. I mean, I think in the preview it happened a bit fast, isn't it? Maybe 0.4. And we do need it to, I mean, let's change the easing a bit. So let's ease on its way out. So it's slower towards the end instead of it being slower in the beginning. Let's see. Let's check this one. Or let's check something with the multiple paragraphs. Maybe check this one. Are all the paragraphs appearing together? Yeah, paragraphs are appearing all at once because we need to stagger them as well. So let's copy this variance. We need to stagger this one. Okay, let's call it stagger variance or variance stagger. which is a variance. Let's memorize it. That's my notifications on my mobile device. Sorry for that. We take the animate out of here, paste it here, take out the variance from here, and then the variance stagger, we place it here. Okay. And why I did this, because we need the same for, say, this one. And we need a variance, set to variance, for the underlying elements as well. Let's go ahead. Refresh. Let's see. Yep, now we have individual animations on the paragraph, but they don't appear at the same time. Even the paragraphs are staggered, which looks cool. Now you can go ahead with this, and maybe we can decrease the duration of this. I'm just playing with this at this point, you know, just playing. Let's make it faster a bit, eh? Nah. Is out is good. Let's make it 0.3. Okay. Yeah, this looks snappy enough. Good balance between snappy and smooth, is it? Or maybe I am very picky. I am very picky. I'm gonna call it 4. I'm gonna call it 3.5. My God. Okay, let's try. Yeah, cool. Cool enough. Okay, one more issue we have is that what if someone doesn't come from this page to this page, but rather just refreshes? You see, the animation would still get fired. Observe. See? Watch. Watch again. Watch again. It still does. So how do we disable the initial animation? We can do so if we pass the initial as false for all of them, which means this, and this would not have any initial animation when the page would be loaded. So like this. Would it work? Let's check it. This one. Nah, passing an initial stops it from animating in the first page, but it stops animating at all. We cannot do that. Let's Google it. Framer motion stop initial animation on. I think we need to stop the initial at the parent, not here. Don't we have a proper initial? We do. Exactly. Let's set this one to false. The animate presence needs to be false, not the actual initial. Animate presence has to know not to fire the animation if we are simply reloading the page, not the individual component, but rather animate presence. I think so. If we reload now, yep, it doesn't fire, but if we transition, it should be firing. And voila, there you go. There you go. You have a beautiful carousel that smooth scrolls, and clicking on them animates beautifully to the next page. And yeah, that's it. Hope this wasn't way too complicated, or I would recommend watching this tutorial over and over again, and to really develop the intuition, because if you can develop the intuition, the coding is actually the easiest part of developing something. So there you go. I have to end this video now. I should really do some script writing and not just blabber on and on in my video. So yeah, that's it. Follow me on Twitter. Hit me up if you face any issues. Hit me up in the comments if you are facing any issues. Get in touch with me. My Twitter username should be appearing somewhere on the screen right now. And this is it for the series. It's just a small mini series of just 2 videos. So, and if you haven't watched the first one, you go for the first one to see how I made that animated carousel. And I'll see you people in some other series in the future. Till then, keep developing. Bye.